In April 2026, the International Energy Agency published its second major analysis of the relationship between artificial intelligence and global energy markets. The report documented a finding that had not appeared in any previous IEA analysis with this specificity. The pipeline of conditional agreements between data center operators and small modular reactor nuclear projects had grown from 25 gigawatts at the end of 2024 to 45 gigawatts as of April 2026. In 18 months, the committed pipeline of nuclear power specifically intended for AI data centers grew by 80%, 20 gigawatts of additional nuclear commitments in a year and a half. For context, 20 gigawatts is approximately the total nuclear generating capacity of the United Kingdom. IEA Executive Director Fatih Birol drew the implication directly. AI is still an energy taker, he said, but it is also becoming an energy maker, driving forward innovative solutions like next-generation nuclear reactors, flexible data centers, and long-duration energy storage. Those 20 gigawatts of new nuclear commitments do not represent power that exists or will exist imminently. Small modular reactors are not yet commercially deployed at scale anywhere in the world. The fastest timeline for the first U.S. data center SMR projects to reach initial operation is 2030. But the 80% growth in the committed pipeline in 18 months represents the moment when a problem that was defined by shortage and delay, AI data centers outrunning the grid's ability to supply them, began generating its own structural solution. And the specific deals driving that pipeline, who signed them, with whom, for how much power, at what facility, on what timeline, tell a story about where America's AI data centers are getting their lifeline from and how long it will actually take to arrive. Subscribe right now, because the combination of corporate nuclear PPAs, federal regulatory reform, state-level grid legislation, and the specific technology of advanced reactor designs is the most consequential energy story in American infrastructure and the one most directly connected to the AI economy that is reshaping every sector it touches. The energy problem that these deals are responding to can be described precisely using numbers that have entered the public record from independent market sources and make the urgency of the nuclear commitments comprehensible without any rhetorical inflation. In the PJM electricity market, which serves 13 states from Illinois to North Carolina and covers most of the data center dense regions of the eastern United States, including Virginia, the capacity market price for the 2026 to 2027 delivery year cleared at $329.17 per megawatt. The price for the 2024 to 2025 delivery year was $28.92 per megawatt. That is a tenfold increase in the price of electricity capacity in the region in a single year, and the academic analysis published in May 2026 identified rapid data center growth as a major contributing factor. In Virginia, Dominion Energy filed in February 2025 for its first residential base rate increase since 1992. The average residential customer will pay approximately $8.51 more per month in 2026 as a result. That is the first base rate increase in 33 years, filed in the first year that AI data center demand became dominant in the region. Dominion's 2024 resource plan projects 27 gigawatts of new generation by 2039, including 21 gigawatts of renewables and small modular reactors and 5.9 gigawatts of natural gas. The IEA's April 2026 report documented that 5 major technology companies spent more than $400 billion on capital expenditures in 2025, and that spending is set to increase by another 75% in 2026. That capital is partly flowing into buildings and hardware. It is increasingly also flowing into long-duration energy contracts, nuclear power agreements, and reactor development deals that represent an attempt by the technology companies generating the AI energy demand to solve the energy supply problem themselves, rather than waiting for grid operators and utilities to solve it for them. The power paradox, as the infrastructure community describes it, is the gap between the 12 to 24 months it takes to build a data center and the decade-long timeline for expanding grid infrastructure to supply it. The corporate nuclear PPAs and SMR deals announced since mid-2024 are the technology companies' attempt to go around that paradox by contracting power from sources that don't require new grid infrastructure to reach the data center, because they can be sited adjacent to it or connected directly to it through dedicated transmission arrangements. The deal that established the template for what large-scale corporate nuclear power agreements look like in the AI era was the 17-year power purchase agreement between Amazon Web Services and Talen Energy, signed in June 2025. Talen Energy operates the Susquehanna nuclear plant in Pennsylvania, a 2-unit pressurized water reactor facility that has been operating since the 1980s. The agreement gives AWS access to 1.92 gigawatts of nuclear power from Susquehanna under a contract running until 2042. That is 17 years of guaranteed nuclear power at firm capacity from an existing operational nuclear plant that does not require permitting, construction, or any of the timeline uncertainty that new nuclear development involves. Amazon simultaneously announced a $20 billion investment in Pennsylvania as part of the initiative, citing the nuclear power access as a central driver of its data center siting decisions in the state. The arrangement uses what the industry calls a front-of-the-meter configuration, where the nuclear power flows through the regional grid before reaching the data center, rather than a behind-the-meter configuration where the plant connects directly to the data center facility. That structure means the power contributes to grid reliability rather than being exclusively consumed by Amazon, addressing one of the concerns that regulators have raised about exclusive data center power contracts, removing generation from the grid that other customers depend on. Amazon's 960 megawatt portion of this agreement for its Pennsylvania campus represents a commitment to nuclear power for AI infrastructure at a scale that had no precedent before the AI energy crisis created demand for it. The deal became one of the models that subsequent technology companies referenced when structuring their own nuclear power arrangements. Subscribe and hit the like button right now, because the subsequent deals built on this template and in some cases went further by involving the restart of facilities that had been retired or the development of reactor technology that had never been commercially deployed. And those additional deals tell a more complete story about where the AI data center lifeline is actually coming from. The Microsoft deal with Constellation Energy for the 3 Mile Island restart has a narrative dimension that no other deal in this story possesses. 3 Mile Island is not just a nuclear plant. It is the site of the 1979 partial meltdown that defined American nuclear anxiety for 2 generations, that effectively ended new nuclear construction in the United States for decades, and whose name became shorthand for the risks of nuclear power in American political discourse. When Constellation Energy proposed restarting 3 Mile Island's Unit 1, which had operated safely for 40 years before being retired in 2019 due to economic pressures rather than safety concerns, it was not simply proposing to restart a power plant. It was proposing to restart the plant whose name remains synonymous with nuclear catastrophe. The Department of Energy approved a $1 billion loan for the restart. Constellation Energy invested to restore the facility and renamed it the Crane Clean Energy Center after the nuclear engineer Eugene Hare Crane. The restart was completed in September 2024. Microsoft signed a 20-year power purchase agreement for 837 megawatts of output. The plant is now operational, providing clean, firm power to Microsoft's data centers in the region, and its name change has not yet overtaken the name that 4 decades of cultural references established. The significance of this deal extends beyond its specific power output. It demonstrated that the political and cultural barriers to nuclear energy in the United States, barriers that had been treated as essentially permanent features of the policy landscape since 1979, could be overcome when the combination of clean energy commitment and data center power demand created sufficient economic and policy pressure. If 3 Mile Island could be restarted to power AI data centers, the category of what was considered impossible in American nuclear energy had definitively changed. The Google deal with Kairos Power, signed in August 2025, represents the most technically ambitious of the major technology company nuclear agreements because it involves a reactor design that has never operated commercially anywhere in the world. Kairos Power is developing what it calls the Hermes reactor, a Generation 4 design that uses molten salt as a coolant rather than the water used in the pressurized and boiling water reactors that constitute essentially the entire existing global nuclear fleet. Molten salt cooling offers potential advantages over water cooling in thermal efficiency and inherent safety characteristics, but it also involves manufacturing, operational, and regulatory challenges that conventional light water reactor technology does not. Google signed a master plant development agreement with Kairos for up to 500 megawatts of power from an initial deployment at the Hermes 2 project in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which would supply electricity through the Tennessee Valley Authority system. The first deployment is targeted to provide 50 megawatts by 2030, scaling toward the full 500 megawatts as subsequent units are built and commissioned. This deal is categorically different from the AWS Talent Agreement because it involves a technology that does not yet exist commercially and a timeline that depends on Kairos Power successfully executing the most technically challenging aspect of SMR development, the first commercial operation of a new reactor design. Kairos achieved a milestone in December 2023 by receiving a construction permit for its Hermes demonstration reactor, which was the first permit issued for a non-light water reactor design in more than 50 years. NuScale Power received full Nuclear Regulatory Commission design certification for its updated 77 megawatt electric design in May 2025, making it the only SMR developer in the United States to have completed the full NRC design certification process, though NuScale has subsequently been navigating project-specific deployment challenges. The federal executive orders of May 2025 mandated an 18-month maximum review timeline for nuclear projects, dramatically compressing the permitting process that had previously been measured in years and had been one of the most significant barriers to new nuclear development in the United States. The Meta and Oklo agreement announced in January 2026 is the largest and most recent of the major AI company nuclear deals, and adds an element that none of the preceding agreements included: the use of nuclear technology not just for power generation but also for cooling. Meta announced a partnership with Oklo, a startup developing compact fast reactors based on technology originally developed at Argonne National Laboratory, to develop a 1.2 gigawatt power campus in Pike County, Ohio. The facility would house 16 Aurora powerhouse reactors, each producing 75 megawatts of electrical output, spread across 206 acres. Meta is providing prepayments to secure nuclear fuel, accelerating phase 1 of the project, which is targeted to deliver 150 megawatts as the first operational units come online. The full campus is expected to reach initial operation by 2030. The cooling dimension of the Oklo deal is the most technically innovative aspect of the announcement. In July 2025, Oklo partnered with Vertiv, a major provider of data center infrastructure, including power and thermal management systems, to develop integrated power and cooling solutions that use steam from Oklo's nuclear plants to drive cooling systems for data centers. This is significant because data center cooling represents approximately 30 to 40% of total data center energy consumption. A system that uses the thermal output of a nuclear reactor to drive absorption chilling for a co-located data center creates an energy efficiency that conventional grid-powered cooling cannot approach. Nuclear plants run at temperatures that create steam as a byproduct of power generation. That steam can drive chillers through a thermodynamic cycle that requires no additional electricity. If an AI data center is located adjacent to a nuclear plant and uses that plant's steam for cooling, in addition to its electrical output for compute, the total energy requirement for the same computational output is substantially lower than for a conventionally grid-powered data center. Oklo describes this vision as integrated power and cooling solutions purpose-built for AI factories, data centers, and high-density compute. A pilot demonstration is planned for Oklo's deployment at Idaho National Laboratory. The state-level regulatory dimension of the AI data center energy story has received less coverage than the corporate deal announcements, but represents a structural change in how power-hungry industrial customers connect to the electricity grid that will affect data center siting decisions throughout the decade. In 2025, Texas passed Senate Bill 6, which redefines the interconnection process for large electrical loads exceeding 75 megawatts within the ERCOT grid that covers most of Texas. Before SB 6, data centers in Texas faced the same grid interconnection queue that every other large industrial customer faced, with timelines that could stretch years in areas where transmission capacity was already constrained. SB 6 created a modified process for large loads that includes more explicit requirements for both the connecting customer and the grid operator, intended to reduce timeline uncertainty and distribute the costs of grid upgrades in a more transparent and predictable way. Texas has positioned itself as a favorable data center siting location, in part through this regulatory reform, offering faster grid connection timelines than are available in major competing locations like Northern Virginia, where grid interconnection queues remain a significant constraint. Dominion Energy's 27 gigawatt generation expansion plan in Virginia, with its explicit inclusion of small modular reactors alongside solar and wind, represents the utility sector's recognition that conventional renewable addition alone cannot serve the 24-hour baseload profile that AI data centers require. Solar and wind generation are intermittent by nature. Nuclear is the only clean energy source that provides firm baseload power at the consistency required for continuous AI workloads. The technology company nuclear deals and the utility nuclear expansion plans are convergent responses to the same problem from different directions. Subscribe right now because the honest assessment of when these lifelines actually deliver power and what the gap between announced deal and operational reactor means for the near-term energy situation is the most practically important part of this entire story. The honest accounting of the timeline creates an important distinction between the AI data center energy problem as it exists today and the AI data center energy problem as the nuclear deals will eventually address it. The fastest timeline for any of the SMR deals to reach initial operation is 2030. Which is the target for Meta's Oklo Phase 1, Google's Kairos First Unit, and the earliest Amazon SMR possibility within Talon's existing nuclear sites. The 3 Mile Island restart and the AWS Talon-Susquehanna deal are already operational or came operational in 2024 and 2025, providing firm nuclear power now. But the aggregate nuclear power available from operational facilities does not yet close the gap between AI demand growth and grid supply. The IEA's April 2026 report projected that data center electricity consumption will double by 2030, and that AI-specific data center power use will triple. The 45 gigawatts in the SMR pipeline are commitments for future capacity on a 4 to 6 year timeline, not power available today. What is available today and what is keeping the lights on in existing AI data centers while the nuclear future is being constructed is a combination of existing nuclear plants under long-term contract, natural gas generation that the IEA identified through satellite tracking as already proliferating at data center sites, grid power from the conventional mix of generation in regional electricity markets, and the corporate renewable PPAs that the tech sector dominated in 2025, accounting for 40% of all corporate renewable power purchase agreements signed globally. The IEA noted that many of the on-site natural gas projects it identified through satellite tracking remain in early stages, highlighting technical and financial hurdles that need to be overcome. Natural gas provides the near-term firm power that the nuclear deals will eventually replace. The environmental implications of running AI compute on natural gas in the interim, and the question of whether the renewable PPAs adequately offset that fossil fuel consumption are active debates in the energy and technology sectors that do not have simple answers. What is clear is that the AI data center energy problem has moved from a crisis with no structural solution to a crisis with a structural solution on a 4 to 6 year timeline, backed by corporate commitments from the technology companies most directly responsible for the problem. The lifeline that America's AI data centers just got is real, and it is measured in gigawatts of nuclear power, contracted, permitted, and in various stages of construction. The lifeline arrives fully in 2030. The gap between now and 2030 is bridged by natural gas, existing nuclear, renewables, and the efficiency improvements that NVIDIA's DSX platform and improved chip designs contribute to the equation. Subscribe to this channel, because the energy story of American AI infrastructure is the infrastructure story of the decade, and the specific contracts, regulatory decisions, and reactor milestones that determine whether the nuclear lifeline arrives on schedule will be covered here as each one becomes visible in the public record. The 80% growth in the SMR pipeline in 18 months is the signal. The megawatts coming online in 2030 are the answer. Everything between now and then is the story. The broader transformation that the AI company nuclear deals represent, beyond their specific power output and delivery timelines, is a change in who is willing to be a first mover in clean, firm power technology and what it takes to make that happen. The United States built no new commercial nuclear plants between 1978 and the Modular reactors in Georgia, which came online between 2023 and 2024 after years of delays and cost overruns. The absence of new nuclear construction for more than 4 decades meant that the supply chains, the engineering workforce, the regulatory experience, and the financing structures for nuclear development atrophied to the point where the Modular reactors took twice as long and cost twice as much as projected. That atrophy is not erased by executive orders or corporate PPAs. It must be rebuilt through actual construction experience, actual regulatory engagement, and actual reactor operations. The SMR deals signed by Google, Meta, Amazon, and Microsoft are the financial demand signal that provides the capital for that rebuilding. The 18-month NRC review timeline, mandated by the May 2025 executive orders, provides the regulatory framework that makes it possible to plan construction on a predictable schedule. The NuScale NRC design certification of May 2025 provides the first fully certified SMR design that developers can build to without uncertainty about regulatory approval of the basic design. Kairos Power's December 2023 construction permit for the Hermes reactor, the first non-light water construction permit in 50 years, provides a proof of concept that the regulatory process can accommodate new reactor technology in a reasonable timeframe. Taken together, these regulatory milestones and corporate deals constitute the infrastructure of a nuclear renaissance specifically shaped to serve the AI economy. The IEA's description of AI as becoming an energy maker, not just an energy taker, captures the mechanism precisely. The AI companies whose data centers are straining the grid are providing the capital that could establish a new commercial nuclear industry capable of serving not only their own power needs, but eventually the broader grid's need for clean, firm baseload power. Whether the specific SMR designs under development can be built at cost, on schedule, and at a scale sufficient to meet projected demand by the early 2030s is the question that the next 4 years of nuclear construction experience will answer. The deals are signed. The capital is committed. The regulatory framework has been reformed. The construction now either delivers the promised reactors on the promised timeline, or it doesn't. The AI data center lifeline is real. Whether it arrives in time and at scale depends on execution. The advanced geothermal dimension of this lifeline story deserves inclusion because it represents a different category of clean, firm power that has received less corporate attention than nuclear, but that shares nuclear's most important characteristic for data center operators. It provides consistent baseload generation that is not dependent on weather conditions. Advanced geothermal, sometimes called next-generation geothermal, uses drilling technology developed in the oil and gas industry to access geothermal heat at depths and locations that were not previously accessible with conventional geothermal drilling methods. Unlike conventional geothermal, which requires naturally occurring hydrothermal reservoirs near the surface, advanced geothermal can potentially be deployed in many more locations by drilling deeper to reach the heat that exists everywhere in the Earth's crust. The DOE's Pathways to Commercial Liftoff report on advanced geothermal identified it as a technology that could enable hundreds of gigawatts of clean, firm capacity by the mid-2030s with greater investment. The technology is less commercially mature than SMRs and has received less media attention, but the data center operators looking at a decade of growing firm power demand are evaluating every technology that can provide it without the weather dependency of solar and wind. If advanced geothermal delivers on its technical potential within the decade, it provides a second lifeline pathway alongside nuclear that does not require the fuel supply chains, the radiation management expertise, or the public acceptance challenges that nuclear development involves. The combination of nuclear and advanced geothermal, both enabled by the AI demand signal that is providing unprecedented private sector capital for clean, firm power development, is the most likely scenario for closing the gap between AI electricity demand and clean electricity supply over the second half of the decade. Subscribe. The energy story of American AI is the infrastructure story of the next 10 years. The specific technologies, the specific deals, and the specific delivery milestones will be followed here as they develop. There is a final dimension of this story that should sit with anyone watching who cares about electricity affordability for ordinary households. The technology companies signing multi-billion-dollar nuclear power agreements are not doing so out of altruism. They are securing competitive advantages in two ways simultaneously. First, they are locking in long-term power costs at prices negotiated today before the SMR industry achieves economies of scale that might make nuclear power cheaper in a decade. A technology company that signed a 20-year nuclear PPA in 2025 at today's prices has a predictable, contractually fixed energy cost for its data center operations through 2045. A competitor that waits until nuclear power is widely available and competitive may pay lower prices, but without the certainty of supply. Second, and more relevant to households in regions where AI demand is raising electricity prices, the nuclear deals provide a path to increasing total clean, firm power supply in regional grids that reduces the pressure on the existing generation mix. More supply reduces prices, all else equal. The $329 per megawatt capacity market price in PJM for 2026 to 2027, 10 times the level of 2 years earlier, reflects insufficient supply relative to demand driven by AI data centers. When the SMR projects contracted by Amazon, Google, Meta, and Microsoft come online by 2030, they add gigawatts of new generation to regional grids, which should moderate capacity market prices, and with them, the wholesale electricity costs that ultimately determine retail rates. This is not a guarantee. The deals do not specify that any of the power must serve residential customers, rather than being dedicated to data center loads. But the power that existing generation currently devotes to powering AI data centers is power that the SMR additions could free up to serve other customers, or the SMR additions could provide additional capacity that reduces market tightness for everyone. The residents of Ohio, Virginia, and Pennsylvania who are seeing electricity bills rise because of AI demand are in the same states where the Meta, AWS, and Microsoft nuclear deals will add new generation in the early 2030s. The connection between the corporate nuclear lifeline and household electricity prices is not direct or immediate. It is real and it is structural, and understanding it changes how you read every electricity bill and every nuclear deal announcement from this point forward. Subscribe to this channel. The nuclear lifeline for America's AI data centers is the most consequential infrastructure story of the decade, and it will be covered here completely, accurately, and in time for you to understand each development before it becomes history.